The message from Rudolf Steiner was clear. Put the preps out. Put it on your lawn. Put it on your flowers. Put it on your farm, on your garden beds, on your 500 acres farm. It doesn't matter. Put the preps out.
Re-educating yourself is so incredibly important because we've hit a line in the sand. Something needs to change. So you just need to get re-educated, and I think new doors and new spaces of being come into play.
Welcome to this podcast series, Biodynamic Farmers and Gardeners in Australia. The series was commissioned by Biodynamic Agriculture Australia Limited and produced by Householders Options to Protect the Environment, Hope Incorporated Australia. Biodynamic Agriculture Australia Limited is a not-for-profit company located in Bellingen, New South Wales. It has been making and supplying biodynamic preparations as well as supporting biodynamic growing in Australia for over 30 years. Biodynamic Agriculture Australia Limited values biodynamics as a practical and holistic technique that is able to regenerate soil, supercharge organic growing, restore biodiversity, and work with Mother Nature. The podcast series was produced on and adjacent to the traditional lands of the Djarawar, Gayabal, Yugara and Waka Waka First Nations peoples of the surrounding region. We pay respect to the past, present and emerging leaders of all First Nation Australians in this country and celebrate the unique contributions their cultures make to this place. And in the context of this podcast series, particularly those contributions involving Indigenous respect for and stewardship of the nature of Australia, with its attendant spiritual and practical care for country, the sovereignty of which was never ceded. Hello, my name is Andrew Nicholson, and I am the producer of the Biodynamic Farmers and Gardeners in Australia podcast series. My guests on this episode of the series, Luigi and Nidya Marasco-Bellido, are share farmers whose business, The Patch Organics, cultivates a 1-acre paddock using biodynamic techniques on what used to be a holding pen for dairy cows. The Patch Organics produces herbs, vegetables and pasture-raised chicken, and the growing on the patch occurs within the bigger certified organic 500-acre Levenvale Farm situated within beautiful rolling hill country near Bellingen, New South Wales. A written account of Luigi and Nidya's biodynamic growing experiences is contained in an associated profile booklet of all the guests interviewed for this podcast series titled Stories of Our Biodynamic Farmers and Gardeners in Australia. Please see Biodynamic Agriculture Australia Limited's website for further details of that text publication. So, Nidya and Luigi, a very warm welcome to you both. It's great to be talking with you today.
Lovely to be talking with you as well, Andrew.
Good to be here.
And folks, let's start the conversation by you giving us a fuller self-introduction to your biodynamic growing work. The question is, therefore, can you give us an outline of the growing you do down there at The Patch Organics and give us a bit of an overview of its location and main features?
So our business, The Patch Organics, is a business where we grow biodynamic veggies, organic meat chickens, and we also do workshops on beautiful Gumbaynggirr country. So that is Bellingen, New South Wales. We share farm, as you said, on Levenvale Farm. So we cultivate a 1-acre paddock on a bigger 500-acre beef cattle farm. On that 1-acre paddock, we grow organic and biodynamic veggies. When we first came onto the property, it was a fallowed paddock, so not in use, overrun with kikuyu. The soil was predominantly clay soil, heavily compacted clay soil as well, on a bit of a slope. It's surrounded by the Great Dividing Range as well. So Bellingen has, and its surrounding valleys has a very unique microclimate where there might be something happening in Coffs Harbour with the weather, and it's completely different weather here in Bellingen and vice versa. So we always have to, we can't always necessarily rely on the weather forecast because it's going to present very differently where we are. And what we grow on the 1 acre paddock is just a really diverse range of veggies, a little bit of what we want to grow for ourselves. Luigi comes from Italy, I come from Peru, so there's a lot of, wanting to grow European and Peruvian veggies, lots of potatoes on my part, as well as, what sells well in these parts. And if there's a market that looks promising, we'll try growing certain veggies there too. So, whatever works really. We're new to this area. We moved down from Brisbane just over 2 years ago. And so there's not only have we been learning how to grow chickens and to do a commercial market garden, but it's really been a journey on understanding this particular microclimate as well, learning what grows well here.
And thanks for that, Nidya. I really appreciate that. Let's, as we move through the interview, let's now get down to brass tacks, as they might say, or down to basics. And just talk a bit more about biodynamics specifically. And as we'll find with other guests in this series, everyone will have a slightly different take on what is a very big subject. But to go to the heart of it, from your own perspectives, in 2023, how would you describe biodynamics? What are some of its basic principles and the benefits of biodynamic methods as they apply in your type of growing down there at the Patch Organics?
Well, Andrew, I will answer. A couple of days ago, we had an event here. It was a birthday event, as Levenvale has a venue for weddings and dinners and different type of events. So this one guy came across and he's like, can you explain me? We are in the middle of a heat wave. How does it come that your plants are still all up and happy? I'm like, well, let me explain that now. I won't write here what I told him, but our plants look completely different from other plants around us. And while time and effort regenerating the soil is definitely a big influence, I don't think we could have reached the quality we have achieved as fast as we have if it wasn't for a use of biodynamic preps and practices. Now, another thing is that biodynamic, in some form, is a form of physically practicing anthroposophy. So now we're here entering a more spiritual world, and in essence, in the agriculture teachings from Steiner, he was very specific, saying that primary producer should produce food for humans. And when he says food for humans, it means that it's a type of food, nutrient dense, with so many, they all say food is medicine, with so many vitamins and packed with antioxidants and all sorts of minerals we need, what it does, it triggers, eating this type of food, it triggers the self-healing properties of a human being. So in other words, we actually don't get sick. When was the last time we got sick? It was quite a while ago.
Fully sick a long time ago, yeah.
So what are the benefits? Well, the plants perform better, and so as a consequence, the business performs better, our family performs better, our finance perform better, and our health performs better. So that's more than enough for me. I wouldn't not use biodynamic. You definitely gotta use it.
Luigi, fantastic to hear all that. You laid out a smorgasbord, no pun intended, of benefits there. High nutrient density food, better health, and financial outcomes. You started to answer the next question that I was going to put to you folks, which is, how do you think some of the biodynamic growing principles, contrast the ones you've just described, how do they contrast to more conventional growing methods? You already mentioned that hydration aspect, that your plants are healthier, even in drought conditions. But do you want to say a bit more, either one of you folks say a bit more about that, how those biodynamic methods contrast to more conventional growing?
Well, look, we all nowadays understand, or a lot of us understand, this issue we're having with synthetic chemicals that we add to our food. So I'll try and say it this way. Most farmers, unfortunately, so let's put it in context to one thing. I just want to say this thing. We have met no farmers that don't care about their land. It doesn't matter if it's conventional farming, organic farming, biodynamic farming. Each single farmer, no matter the practices they use to make their wage, they actually do care about their land. So I just want to make sure I'm saying this. I don't want my words to be misunderstood. Now, in saying that, we have to understand that conventional farming, the approach of conventional farming basically is waking up in the morning and opening the wardrobe with the question, what am I going to kill today? Which one is the pest that is killing my crop? What's happening? When our way of farming, we wake up in the morning and we're like, what about we try and grow something today instead of killing something? So now what we're talking about here is that with the synthetic chemicals farming industry, we try to kill whatever, the caterpillar or the cabbage moth or whatever little insects it's actually sort of giving us pain. But what are we killing at the same time while spraying the synthetic chemical? So now what I want to say is that we're killing the soil. And so we're going back in the main issue here. What are primary producers farming? Well, I tell you now, Andrew, we all farming the same thing. We all farming soil. Now, the produce we get out of the land, out of the soil, it can be different from one to the other, but we are all farming soil. I want to be strong on this topic.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter whether you're growing beef or chickens or veggies. We're all soil farmers inherently, and that is the primary difference. Now, I don't necessarily think that that's going to stay that way for too much longer. I think that there's so much soil science coming out now that is just overwhelming, that it's really hard if you're a farmer to continue the cocktail mixes of chemical pesticides, and say that's the best way that you treat your soil if you want a sustainable business into the future. But yeah, that's the main differentiator between what we're doing and conventional farming is that we're working towards increased biology in the soil, and then as an outcome, as a very beneficial outcome to our health and to our community, we're also getting super healthy plants. Now, that relationship, how does that happen? It's mainly about understanding the role of the biology in our soils and feeding. Literally, all the practices that we do, that we implement, feeds the soil bacteria, the soil microbiota. These microbes thrive on a diversity of food. The minerals that we add are inherent in the soil, as well as all of the, extra food, the root system, the diverse root systems that we add on there, and the bacteria eat all of that up, and the plants benefit as a consequence. When the plants benefit as a consequence, we grow healthier plants. We're growing more nutritious plants because they're healthier and happier. That means that they're naturally pest resilient as well, which reduces our need to then apply even more chemicals to get rid of that particular pest that we want to get rid of. And then once you increase the health of the plant because you've increased the health of your soil, then you as a consumer are then increasing your own personal health of yourself and your family. They say that the word organics comes from organism because, again, fundamentally, it's all about the soil microbiology and making sure that you're farming that and creating as healthy soil as possible.
So, it's from my understanding, in fact, what I was saying before, lots of conventional farmers, they try to control nature by killing the one insects they don't like, where the way we actually see it, the way we see how, we definitely, as permaculturists, we try and understand how nature works. So that's what we're trying to replicate in our little 1 acre patch. And how nature works is that pests, in whatever form, they actually come to get rid of what's already sick there. So what we do here, we add enough biology through compost teas, biodynamics preps. All our vermicast have the biodynamic composting balls. All our compost teas have the composting balls in answers in. So we try to do with minerals and biology is to actually boost the immune system of the plant to be so healthy, so the pest doesn't need to come and get rid of it. Nature doesn't want to get rid of it. It actually makes it thrive. So I guess that's a new approach of also the pest management we're doing. Very hard to apply this type of concept in big scale monocrop. Nature doesn't work that way. So yeah, I guess we're lucky the way we're going. Everything is thriving well.
It's a lot of work. I mean, like we grow weeds as well, but I think it's just about a mental perspective. It's the way you think about your yield and I guess your role as a farmer. Yes, we're growing weeds, but then that means that you're growing a diverse species. And, like every weed has a role to play. Same with what Luigi said, every pest has a role to play. So it's only a problem if it's out of balance. So that's definitely one of our strong learnings from our permaculture studies as well. What role is that fauna or flora playing? What are the many functions that it has to play? It's very much a thinking game as much as it is, just farming.
Just to add one last thing on this one, is the difference between conventional farming and our type of farming. So between all the pests that we have encountered in the last 2 years, I'm pretty sure they know all of them, but for all what we have encountered, there was this one pest that we couldn't control, and it's the stink bug. He attacks our tomatoes, he attacks our eggplants, and it just destroys the crops. So let's say a conventional farming approach would be to go to the shop and see which chemical will basically kill this bug, and then spray the chemical, kill the bug, done. What we have done is to go into a research of what predator insect eats this bug. Now we have found the predator insect. So what we go and research is what habitat we can create to attract this predator insect. Well, now that's our pest management. We didn't buy any chemical. We actually allowed nature in. Obviously, after a bit of research and try to understand the situation.
So I guess that's another main differentiator is that our style of farming is additive. We add in an effort to solve a perceived problem, whereas conventional farming is detracting. You take away through various tools such as pesticides.
Very rich section there, folks. It'd be impossible to summarize that. I'm not going to try, but I'm just going to riff off what you've said there, take a few points out. And again, these are some common themes that I've heard in the other interviews in this series, but they're all slightly posed in a different way. But that much closer focus that biodynamics brings, a much closer focus on and concern for the soil. Well, not just the soil, the entire landscape, but we've been talking about the soil there. The soil is seen as a living community that has to be worked with. It's almost that sort of collaborative sort of theme that's come across some other interviews. You don't whack it over the head. You don't try and control it with chemical inputs. There isn't a quick fix or a technical fix. I mean, this is one of the major differentiation points. But in that closer intentional, I've heard the term intentional used quite often, intentional focus on, these living communities, you do find solutions, and they're more sustainable solutions. They're longer lasting solutions in the long term, because you're not destroying the very basis of that very intricate community of life that you're working with. And that's part of that regenerative agriculture approach generally. I mean, whether it be permaculture, organics, or whatever. I also am just thinking that, Luigi mentioned right back at the beginning of that section the fact that all farmers want to do the best for their land, get the best from their properties, do the right thing. I think, at a bigger picture level, what we're talking about here is increasingly a change of mindset in the way that we approach agriculture. I mean, these conventional methods have been around for a long time, decades, even hundreds of years, and nothing changes quickly. But, these new ideas, these more harmonious nature supportive ideas of growing agriculture are coming in, and you've just given us a marvelous, sort of range of ideas around that.
Yeah, it's a structural change as much as an internal mind shift change. When you go to ag school, you get given what you think is a great education, and if the education system is telling you that these are the methods that you use to produce a crop, then that's what you do. And when yield is the main outcome, that in agriculture, in today's agriculture, to prove to you that you are either a good farmer or not, then that's the metric that you use to say that you're doing good or not. But then apply that same methodology over 50 years and all you see is a deteriorating landscape, then things have to change. And also ag schools have to accept new science. And well, that is what's happening. And things are changing, which is, fantastic.
Yeah, well made. That point is well made. So let's change the perspective now slightly, and let's go back in time. Past, present, future. We're going to be moving around these different time frames in this interview. Let's go back to the very beginning for you two and how you first became involved with biodynamic growing. So give us a bit of your background story here. For instance, did you experience a gradual or a sudden shift towards biodynamic work? Were there any early influential mentors or influencers of significance? And what resources did you tap into to help build up your clearly growing knowledge and expertise in biodynamics over time?
For us, biodynamic was a solution to a major problem we had. So let's put it in context again. We start our business, basically the excavation of the terraces, first half acre. It happened in September. We invested a lot of our savings, and so we were very, very keen to get straight into production and start converting some of those veggies into coins again. And we did. In December, January, we already had producers on the stall at the markets, and we were already very small producers, not the best quality, year one, but we had some producers there. What happened a few weeks later, we got the 2021 floods in. So that basically nearly killed our business, but definitely killed our market garden. So we are now in April. My wife is giving birth to our first baby. We have a dead business, very low savings. And I have to find a solution to get back into production now. So I start looking for solutions. And I remember 1 year before, I have met this guy. His name was Mark Pye. And he was a very happy guy, very experienced in farming, always been around here. And so we started talking, and he was a very successful farmer. I have been in his farm. I saw his produces were so beautiful. So he was one of the first people that I approached and be like, man, I have this problem here. What do I do here? And he's like, look, first thing, as everyone else here, your soil most likely now is anaerobic. So you really need to reoxygenate and re-aerate the whole thing. But second thing, I will just like sprint the life force by using biodynamic like Stradware. And so I'm like, all right, that's the advice. And he's like, by the way, is there you have a bit of time to help us at biodynamics? And I'm like, that's all right, I guess I can volunteer half day, in exchange of all these beautiful advices you're giving us. So that's where I met. So his name, Mark Pye. He was one of biodynamic BAA workers. And together with John Hutchinson, they became my mentors for the pasture organics, for the market garden. So it was a very sudden change to biodynamics as I was searching for a solution, and I started applying it. The change, it was so visible and so quick. I may add one point here. Small scale gardens, most likely they see biodynamic result in within months. Bigger scale farming like Levenvale here, 500 acres, they're gonna see some difference within the 3 to 5 years. So that's different scale. So you can expect that in a big scale farming. But in a small scale farm, as our patch, we saw the difference within months, and so we applied more. And so as I was volunteering BAA, they would give me more advices and more information. So there was a consistent learning for me. And having access to the preparations from there, that was basically how we started.
And we had been wanting to get educated in biodynamics the year prior, but we were in the middle of COVID the year prior, and so all of the workshops that BAA was trying to get off the ground, they were just being cancelled or were not able to be had. So we already were interested, but this was kind of like a push in the deep end of the pool for Luigi, and at the perfect time, I guess, to go straight in there with these mentors. Sorry, baby, continue.
So how I started is, I guess, how everyone should start. We did apply soil activator, which is a specific preparations created and developed and produced by the PAA. Very powerful stuff, that one. So definitely that's how we started with. But straight after my second tool that I got from them, it was an astro calendar. My life was messy at this stage. I had a newborn baby, first baby, and you basically big jump in the unknown of what's going on. I need to get back into production as soon as I can. I really need to be smart in scheduling my time. I really can't waste at this stage, not even days. So got myself a calendar, and I will sow when the calendar say, I will transplant when the calendar says so, and I wouldn't do when the calendar wouldn't say so. That was very efficient. I have to say that, they made the garden more efficient. My life, my farming activity.
Yeah, because we essentially went from 2 farm workers to just 1. Luigi and this business in its infancy had to support a small family now. So yeah, it was a very stressful time as well.
So obviously from there was about expanding to more preparations and just applying more of this, more of that, see how it works. And then I get into the curiosity. So I'm now into the field of curiosity. I start using the preparations and see how they turn out. Mark Pye and John Hutchinson, they are my mentors. I keep calling them. John, well, I see him every week. BAA. Mark is now in Mount Tambourine, but we chat like very often. Because this is one of the other things. What are we doing about biodynamics knowledge? Where is getting lost? And this is a big problem. So what I'm trying to do in my little world is to keep this knowledge alive. Basically, I'm letting John and Mark and all the wise ones passing the knowledge to us, the young ones, so we can keep it and we can keep practicing it. Now, after John and Mark, here on Levenvale, last year, I was offered a ticket for a 2-day biodynamic course run by Amish Mackay and Charlie Arnold. My surprise was they are another preparation making association or something. I don't know what type of model they are, but there are more people around us that do biodynamics, and I'm meeting more and more around us, and I can't wait to find any other one and give them a hug and a big thank for using biodynamics and producing food for humans.
Well, folks, Luigi, particularly, really inspiring story there. A story of, of younger pioneers coming into a new field of endeavor, new work practice, juggling many balls, many different stresses going on at the time, extreme weather, birth of their first child, pandemic in the background. Your business was in its, to give it a bit of a pun, your business was in its infancy, and you just welcomed, a new human infant into your family. But nonetheless, you were able, and I've heard this from other interviews in this series, you were able to tap into the generosity of other biodynamic growers. Biodynamic growers and practitioners seem to be very prepared to offer their advice. This is what I've been hearing, offer their advice and guidance to people coming into the actual form of growing. Also, just that very rapid improvement when you did pick up this advice, when you did start, using those preparations, when you did start using for you these very new methods, you saw a very rapid improvement in your soils, in your growing abilities at the scale of the property that you're working on there. But I've heard this also and read about this, that biodynamics has the capacity to regenerate soils over quite a short time period in comparative terms. 3 to 5 years to regenerate soil, which, as I understand it, as a layperson with not a great deal of experience, is still a pretty rapid turnover to be able to regenerate degraded soils, get them back to health. So, this is the promise of biodynamics at a bigger picture as part of that rainbow spectrum of regenerative methods, that we can restore perhaps very large areas of degraded soil in the future. That's certainly the message of other, pioneers in different areas, like Charles Massey, that book, Call of the Reed Warbler, where he goes through a whole series of case studies of different approaches to regenerative agriculture. But the promise of that these methods, be they biodynamic or otherwise, have great potential to restore soils. And then you mentioned some of the movers and shakers there that you've also encountered, both at Biodynamics Agriculture Australia, John Hodgkinson, but also in that wider field. Charlie Arnott, who in fact has his own podcast series that's well worth a listen, and I'm going to put references to that in the show notes. So, folks, as we work through this very rich interview, that was a very rich section as well. We are going to hear more about the biodynamic methods you use there at the Patch Organics. But I know that you actually, talking about the influences you've come under, you've got more to say about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch back on what you said before, the generosity of our community within in biodynamics to share the knowledge. And I think that has a lot to do with the history of biodynamics and how it first came about. It was created. It was channeled by Rudolf Steiner as an answer. It was basically a post-war response. It was after World War One, and he wanted to heal the land. A whole bunch of like an ag group went up to him, asking him for advice, but he could also hear the land needing to be healed after the destruction of World War One. And so there is a deep understanding amongst more spiritually practicing biodynamic the more spiritually practicing biodynamic community, that the preps need to be sprayed across more land in order to heal the land. And that work should have been finished by now if we wanted to follow Steiner's initial goals, but it still needs to happen. So that's where the generosity comes from, because the more people apply biodynamics into the property, the more the land heals or regenerates.
And it was when in the 70s that permaculture came through with this huge research from Bill Mollison and his assistant David Holmgreen. Well, David Holmgreen, when they sort of developed the three ethics of permaculture, the care for the people, the care for the land, and the fair share, well, David Holmgreen has identified biodynamic as the best tool to care for the land. So that was like the basics of it.
Mm.
So they're very interesting that more and more people, more and more research come in and say, hey, shouldn't you do that?
So during that time, because I had just had a baby, I was very vague, you know, in the throes of postpartum. But Luigi, when he gets obsessed over something, he goes full deep. And so he started reading the agricultural manual. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Created by Rudolf Steiner, which is just a series of his lectures to this ag group that he was consulting for at the time. And then also soon after that, he started working at Biodynamics Australia. He still is working for Biodynamics Australia to this day.
And just to give the timeline there, folks, I'm assuming this would have been around 2021 period, something around that time.
So April 2022, we started applying Biodynamics.
Oh, yes.
I love that historical background. I'm a fan of the history of ideas, you know, situating biodynamics, you know, in the total history of the evolution of the thought that's created it. I'm very, very interested in that lovely reference to permaculture pioneers, Holmgren and Mollison. We'll put a link to some of their works in the show notes as well. And, you know, just continuing that theme, we will come back to that sort of spiritual, cosmic aspect of Steiner's particular enthusiasms around attempting to heal the massive devastation caused by World War I that amongst other things, devastated huge areas of agricultural growing in Europe. But just staying now, but in 2023, coming back to 2023 specifically, and the last couple of years, the work that you've done on the patch organics, those biodynamic methods that you have been talking about already in outline, do you want to tell us a bit more about that? Tell us a bit more about those specific methods and approaches that you have brought to help regenerate and restore the biology of your soil to such great beneficial outcomes.
Well, first of all, we started with the basics. So the basics of biodynamics is soil application. So that's something that works under the ground. And atmospheric spray. So that's something that works between the atmosphere and the ground. So just above the plants. So they're the basics. But then from there, I'm a very curious person, as Nidya was saying before. I like to dig deep. And in fact, I want to say also this other thing, prove me wrong. Whatever I'm saying, please prove me wrong. This is real science. So the moment you can prove me wrong, we now call it scientific. So be very skeptical and go out there and prove me wrong and come back and say you couldn't. So from there, I started running all my little experiments. So first of all, we here talking about life force. And so how you enhance life force, it's not just in your vermicast tank, but it's the whole of the land where you farm and even around you, if it's the case. So
including yourself.
Including yourself, you're part of the land, yeah, 100%. Some of the tests I ran was, for example, I do include combined into my seedling mix, and there was like a huge, massive difference where now I have zucchini germinating within 5 days and like producing within 4 weeks, not even. That's something incredible. I started using combined also during the transplant. There is a bit more to it. I was told by Mark to use seaweed when transplanting. And he was claiming that it is a sort of a tonic for the roots. So the roots go under less stress once they get soaked into seaweed. Now, obviously, we're talking about biodynamic seaweed. So that's seaweed enhanced with the biodynamic composting balls. And so I did that. What I have discovered, so beforehand, I will transplant the plant from the greenhouse down into the field, and it will take up to 10 days to actually establish. So that's 10 days there that I'm looking at this plant and I'm waiting for it. And then I started using seaweed, as Mark suggested, and the period is shrunk to 7 days. So now the plant established much earlier. And so one day I had a little bit of combined in my jar. I'm like, I want to try instead of seaweed to use combined instead. They just instantly established. So don't even lose 1 day. So all of a sudden here, I'm saving sometimes up to 2 weeks in production. So let's talk about early crops. Well, that's how we get them.
And a higher rate of transplant success.
That's correct. Yeah, not many plants. And then I went back to Mark saying, hey, that's what I'm discovering in my little tests. What do you think about it? He's like, look, I think that's very possible, because at the end the combined is, yes, the seaweed, but we also add a little bit of liquid fish. So you actually also not just giving the vitamins to the roots, but the instant straight food for them. So they are actually establishing instantly. How great is that? Now, another thing I would like to say is that, yes, we can buy all the preparations from different providers, obviously BAA, but if we can, we should try and also make some on site. So we are very much fan of what it used to be called cow pat pit, very fun name. We now more commonly call it manure concentrate. So manure concentrate, it has basically, it's fermented manure in a pit. You go, or if you can, buy the ingredients from BAA as they come in a cow pat pit kit. Sorry about that. And it will come with the calcium eggshells. It will come with the equicidum. It will come with the palagonite dust. And it will come with all the preparations in the kit that are needed for it. So here on site, we have 2 manure concentrate pits that we keep on using as we go. So,
and we use it for our workshops as well.
So we use one, and then we fill it up, and as that ferments, we just use the other one. So we are definitely adding way more biodynamic preps that there are recommended dose. But look, let's talk about numbers a bit. I think a cow pat pit kit cost maybe, I don't know, $300 or $400, and it will give me basically the fertility for a whole cycle of veggies of a season. So what are we talking there? 20, 30,000? So what about in and out? So very cheap fertilizer the way I see it, but very powerful. So thanks for being cheap. What can I say?
And the more important thing about doing your own preparations is the fact that you are taking a holistic view in your garden in mind by including yourself as a gardener. Luigi will talk in a second about intention, but intention is so important when it comes to the practice of biodynamics. It's so important that we've really started integrating it into our daily life as well. So yes, you can, different biodynamic organizations make life easier for everyone by creating the preparations themselves on scale, and that is the best way to get these preparations out on land in the fastest way possible. But when you have your own intention in the preparations that you have created yourself, when you've stirred your own water, when you've fermented, when you've actually taken the time to do that, I think it lends to a very, far more connected way of tending to your soil.
And that last comment, Nidya, and just we are now, moving quite nicely, segueing, as they say, isn't it, the case, the expression, into this next question around the more spiritual, cosmic elements of biodynamic practice. But just to stay with Luigi's comments there for a moment, I mean, that very interesting set of anecdotes about your experiments. I mean, you're taking this is my understanding as a layperson, you're taking this sort of like purist methodology of biodynamic practice. You mentioned, for instance, Steiner's agricultural lectures back from the 1920s, early 1920s. Those principles have been, as they would unsurprisingly be, adopted and adapted over the last 100 years. People have been doing experiments, including yourself, but you're demonstrating the proof of the basic biodynamic principles. You're not just, sitting back and saying, this is an article of faith, I'm taking this as a given, but you've gone out there and you've done your own experiments and you've tweaked and you've adapted. And guess what? You found that you haven't been disproved wrong. I mean, in other words, the hypothesis hasn't been falsified. Therefore, this stuff works. You've got the actual concrete demonstration on the ground in front of your face. And I've heard this with other growers as well. They've used the basic principles, but they've adapted and tweaked them to the set circumstances of their own growing situation in 2023. Also, just that comment about the lower cost of preparations. It is a economic no-brainer, perhaps, might be, as a layperson looking at this, compared to the huge cost. Like the fertilizer bill of conventional farmers, again, heard some stories about this, in other interviews, compared to the relatively cheap cost of biodynamic preparations, because essentially they're inoculations. They're not additives as such. They're inoculating the soil biology as opposed to whacking loads of stuff on top of it. And Nidya's comment, I just think from an environmental science point of view, looking at this at a bigger picture, I'm always trying to make sense of the stuff I'm thinking about and talking through with guests. This holism principle, once again, of everything being joined to everything else. The social is joined to the economic, which is joined to the environmental. We're now going to come on and talk about intention, which I see as a sort of unpacking a bit of that social bottom line. Nidya, you were talking there about the personal. You've got to, as a biodynamic grower, my growing understanding, no pun intended, as I've gone through these interviews, is you have to be aware of yourself as well. What you bring as an individual human being to the growing experience. So this leads into this bigger picture, cosmic, spiritual aspect of biodynamics, which I think, my understanding is, it makes it more or less unique. It differentiates it from the other regenerative approaches to growing. Let's hear your take on this, though. What's been your experiences of that more spiritual, cosmic aspect that Rudolf Steiner brought into the principles of biodynamics right back in the day when he was talking in the early 1920s? In 2023, what's your take on those now?
So before biodynamics, so I'm going to try and connect it back. But before biodynamics, before we even became, moved down to Bellingen and became market gardeners, both Luigi and I had started a journey of personal development and trying to create a reality into our future where we felt a lot more connected with the land, and that we grew our spirituality. And at that time, we were quite spiritually, well, I was anyway, quite spiritually skeptic. But Luigi had already started on that path. But we were seeking something, we were seeking guidance. And we actually fell into, when we learned about biodynamics, I think at the time, we didn't know it was connected to anthroposophy. We had started learning about anthroposophy. And we knew we wanted to start a family. We knew that Rudolf Steiner was connected to the Waldorf school, so Rudolf Steiner education. But it was later on that we also realized that Rudolf Steiner was responsible for biodynamics. So essentially all of these streams, all of these branches come from a central core, which is anthroposophy. And anthroposophy is, for us anyway, I guess the map or the answer to creating a more spiritual life that's more connected, and bringing ritual and different practices back in. We're still studying. It's we're still embodying it. But we've noticed, or I've noticed in particular, that lots of little practices that we've been doing in the market garden, practicing biodynamics, like, for example, the practice of stirring, which is so incredibly important, the stirring of the water, has connections to, a documentary we saw together ages ago before we became commercial market gardeners. It was this
it was from Japan, no?
Yeah, documentary called, I think his name was Masamaru Emoto. And he was just doing like this massive research on water, and his hypothesis is that the water had consciousness or memory, and that it responded to intention. It even responded to you writing on a piece of paper a positive word or a negative word, and the water crystals under a microscope would change. And then there's a lot of lot of information and a lot of research on, structured water nowadays, and how important that is for our biology, for our human health. And so, through and our studies in anthroposophy, that definitely has a lot to do with intention. Through our past, interest in, documentaries, again, like this word intention is so strong. And then even like from a personal level in the home, I found myself when we had our baby girl, that I started to create a prayer or like a spell every single time I bathed her. And the intention behind that was basically to introduce my baby girl to this body of water, wherever that body of water may end up. Maybe it might end up connecting to the greater body of water out there that then connects us all in the world. I just really wanted water to know my baby. And I found myself repeating this prayer over and over again in those early weeks. And I should probably do it again because I've stopped. But that was just really a really, really strong calling for me to do. And I think for us, biodynamics is this practice of spirituality that you don't realize you're doing, but it does fundamentally connect you, and it does fundamentally make you more spiritual as a consequence of. And I think when those gates are opened, then if you hadn't gone in, if you didn't know about anthroposophy, you will eventually go into anthroposophy and then start that spiritual journey on a deeper level.
So just to add a couple of things about the steering. First of all, one of the first things I was impressed, again, talking about spirituality, which is something that you can explain. There is a difference between when you start stirring this bucket of water and 20 minutes later. My experience in regards was with valerian. The water after the 20 minutes stirring is different. It's silky, it's smooth, it's warmer. There is such a change that you can feel on your hand. So now, obviously, because of the scale we did buy a little flow form that does the steering for us, but I still do the steering in a bucket when I can, just for the feeling of it. It's really nice to do so. Another point that I wanted to add on the steering of the water and on the memory. So let's say it this way. Once we know through Masaru Emoto water scientific research, which is out there and been published, so once we know the effect that certain energies have on water, can we think, like, for example, in East Europe right now, what type of energies do we have in Ukraine, for example, where humans are killing other humans? The water is seeing this. The water is feeling all those chemicals, all those bombing, all this death and blood.
All this fear.
This water is going to keep the memory until the day someone is going to reset it again. So here we are. How many damages and very evil stuff have we done, human species, especially after the Industrial Revolution to now? So here is again the importance of resetting our water before we even use it. So just another quick point there.
And backwards, so that's like outside coming in, but in the same frame, resetting ourselves before we send it away again.
Yeah.
Because we want to send out positively charged water.
Yeah, for sure. So in fact, all the water that is running off full synthetic chemical farming, well, this water is getting an imprinting from that. So yeah, I guess we'll leave it that. Don't go too deep in that.
So Luigi and Nidya, thanks again. A fascinating section there on that cosmic and spiritual aspect of biodynamics, bringing in that wider philosophy of anthroposophy. I'll put some links in the show notes to that. But again, I mean, just trying to summarize the impossible there in the sense of so many different strands interacting. But I've heard, again, this theme coming through the various interviews in this series of this very important contribution that biodynamics makes to people's interest. It may have already been pre-existing, but it seems to be given an extra boost through coming through biodynamic growing around this idea of personal growth and development, a personal philosophical position, finding out more about yourself, that spiritual growth, spirit in the sense of energy, not spirit in the sense of a religious practice, but becoming more aware of the fact that we're embedded in a wider world of energies. The nature around us is full of energies, almost reminiscent to me of an indigenous worldview, that ability of indigenous people, at least before pre-colonization, to understand that they were a living part of the world. They weren't separate from it. And so this equivalence of themselves as humans with all of the organisms and the other than human beings around them, be they trees, plants, insects, birds, etc., there's almost that need to find a new way for the world to be sacred again, to find and tap into those energies, realizing, as perhaps Luigi, you mentioned, by doing the opposite, by denying all those connections, by trashing them, what sort of world have we created? We've created a world of negative energies, of viciousness, of violence, of aggression, etc., etc. So, yeah, very, very interested to hear that. But again, interesting to hear that biodynamics says something about it as a practice that brings that to the fore for most people who come into the growing practice. You don't have to understand that, but it seems that it has automatically produced that for people. I don't know whether you'd
yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think there's something to do with when you embody something and when you practice it in your body, and it becomes repetitive. It becomes repetitive. I think there is more of a subconscious connection that's happening that you as a conscious being can know. I think that there's a lot of intelligence in the body. It doesn't just live in the brain. A lot of intelligence in the body. I mean, I personally experienced it when I had Scylla, that all of my perspectives on nurture versus nature were kind of, went out the window, because I realized that my body outside of me and my own intelligence just knew what to do. And I found a newfound respect and then a deep trust for my body. I was calling from many aspects that were beyond my own conscious intelligence. And that works the other way as well. Even if you're not consciously doing something with your body's just doing it. I think it connects to something deeper. And if you do start following anthroposophy, then the idea that we are spiritual connected beings is, it's basically the center of anthroposophy, and so that there's something more, that we're doing, that we're something more to our humanity, and that there's something more with the connections that we're creating with the things that we touch and the things that we do. Yes, and yeah, intention is the word. I think when you don't have to be growing plants necessarily. It's in everything that you do. You're growing beef. We grow chickens as well. Again, it's about what we consume and the kind of positive energy that product has, and therefore the benefits that we have in consuming something that has positive energy with positive intentions.
And I also think, just to round that off, I mean, you're growing chickens, you're growing crops, you're also growing children. And I think in the sense of, that future generations, harking back to perhaps those comments, Luigi, war zones and stuff, we need as a human culture to find better ways of living on the planet, with ourselves, between ourselves, but also with the natural world around us, if we are going to, make it for a civilized society for the long term.
Isn't it too sad to look a kid like my daughter, 1 year and a half old, and I know that if we keep going this way, she won't have fertility in the soil. She won't be able to grow healthy food. So how can you look a kid now, knowing this and doing nothing? That's not humane.
Yeah, we as a species continuing to cultivate in a conventional form. Not we personally, because we're trying to do everything that we can to ensure that she does have healthy soils.
Let's just round this section off, folks. Perhaps another way of putting this is, look, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And perhaps it would be incumbent on all of us to be more explorative, more curious, more inspired, and frankly, more brave to go out and find out more about what we don't know, as you two have patently done down on the Patch Organics. So, folks, again, that just amazing section there. Look, moving toward the end of this wonderful interview, let's change focus once again. We've just been talking about the bigger picture aspects of biodynamic practice, and also linking to even bigger picture elements such as anthroposophy, as a philosophy, as a way of actually being a better way of being in the world as human beings. But we know that, achieving any sort of reform, progressive reform, beneficial change rarely happens easily in human society. And we all eventually, at some stage, tend to find that we come up against challenges, difficulties, pushback around the ideas that we're trying to put forward, or the practices we're trying to instill, or whatever benefits we're trying to bring forth in the world. So bringing it all the way back, the discussion right back down to the Patch Organics 2023, you working down there in Bellingen, what have been some of the challenges you've had to overcome on that small but very highly productive area of land that you cultivate? And what are the challenges that you might still be working to overcome down there?
Oh, challenges. I may challenge the question here. As in 2023, we didn't have actually challenges. Our challenge and why we started Biodynamic, it was because of the floods. I actually will say different. Let's say that the floods allow us to start biodynamics then. If it wasn't for the floods, we will have started it anyway. We just don't know when. So biodynamic is a practice, or supposed to be a practice of farming. You don't apply biodynamics because you have a challenge. You can, and it will work. But what about we use biodynamic as a farming practice? Not because we had a problem, just because it's the way we do.
It's just all alone. I mean, you can't say that we're not finding anything a challenge. It's just more, I think post-flood, we have a different baseline for resiliency. So we just look at problems differently now. And like, for example, we recently had a heat wave. Of course, you can see the heat wave as a challenge, but, our microclimate it's just extreme. And so it is the way it is. And so now we have tools that we can rely on. We've been farming for a really short time, so we don't have a deep wealth of experience to draw from, but the experiences that we have had in a short time have been varied and deep. And so like Luigi says, we now have tools at our disposal from experience and from learning the land that we just quickly apply here and there. One of the biggest ones that we do, and I'm probably skipping ahead here, I know Luigi does want to talk about this more, is observe and interact. So yes, the heat wave happened, slowly getting bigger. I asked Luigi, should we do anything about it, more specifically, with the plants or with the chickens? And he's like, I'm currently observing. And let's see how we go. So, that instantly puts me in a nervous state, because for me, it's like, we're not acting, this is happening, we're not acting. But when, observe and interact is a principle that we've relied on numerous times from permaculture. And again, it's a principle and a tool to remind ourselves that we just need to be patient. We just need to watch. We just need to observe. We just need to be a little bit slower instead of, throwing a solution very quickly in a panicked state. We just have to slow down a bit and just, watch and wait, and then act at the right time. And that's exactly what he did. So yeah, again, you could call it challenges, but I think it's just a reminder that it's continual learning. and you're constantly, I don't know, responding to your landscape where we've chosen to live. It's a relationship. It's a continual relationship.
I just love that, in a sense, a very understandable reframing, perhaps, of challenge as opportunity. And again, I've heard this theme coming out from other guests. But essentially, you're nimble, to use a term. I mean, that might sound like an unusual term, just come to the top of my head. You can act and adapt very quickly because of that intentional focus. You're closely focused on the property all the time. You're observing minute changes, etc., etc. You've got that feedback, and so you can act and adapt very quickly. And it's working. I'm hearing that basically you're ahead of the game in terms of your growing work. You've been new to this field, but you in a very relatively short time, you've produced excellent results, demonstrated results in terms of what you grow down there at the Patch Organic. So it speaks for itself. So on that very happy and optimistic note, let's, in the last section of this great interview, let's now shift the focus to the future. The question is, what does the future hold for you and your property?
Look, so let's again put it in context. The Patch Organics, that's the name of our business, and it's based on 3 pillars. Pillar 1 is the veggies, pillar 2 is the chicken meat, pillar 3 is the workshops. Now, a natural path for us is once this is set, once the veggie garden is at max production, and it is now full producting, the chicken business, we are going to expand to double it and expand it to 400 chickens a month by next year. So there will be a max capacity for our life, what we like. The third pillar is the workshop. So that's where our future is. We need more energy. We need more of those small scale producing superfood for humans. This is possible. It is cheap. It is a reasonable investment. And in our case, is giving us soon the same wage we were getting in the city before. So this is very possible. What people need is a little bit more mentoring and definitely more knowledge and experience to be shared. So here we are. We are moving, a natural path for us will be moving into consulting and sharing experience and knowledge through workshops. So we will have more of those little systems.
Our tagline for the workshops pillar is to increase community resilience. Essentially, our tagline for the business itself is to increase community resilience. And we're doing that on the health front with the nutrient-dense food from the chickens and the veggies. And we're doing that on the community side with the education, with the workshops. So helping the community increase their own self-resilience by giving them the skills and the knowledge they need to, support themselves, by growing their own food, by doing it themselves.
What we were talking before about the spirituality is we humans can create our future. We can actually create our reality. Now, I'm maybe going a bit too deep into the potential of the human being, but let's leave it there. If we can create our reality, well, that's what I asked myself. What reality do I want around me? Well, I want happy people around me. I like to be surrounded by sad people. I want healthy people around me, right? I want a community that collaborates. So here we are. So we are doing our part in creating this community or helping, then it will become my reality.
Again, folks, I just love this because, again, it just, I know I'm keeping harping on about holism because holism is my sort of concept from environmental science, but everything is connected to everything else. Again, it's clear from both your interview, as you've been talking, but also other interviews, that biodynamics at its best is a generous growing practice. It's generous in the sense that it's growing not just for financial gain and financial return, and everyone has to make a living, but it's generous in the sense that it sees part of its role as growing community connection, of growing community capacity, of giving something back to the community. I mean, And what more could you give back to the community than setting up a process of producing highly nutritious food that actually conserves the plants and animals, the biodiversity of an area, that actually locks up more carbon out of the atmosphere, hence to some extent making a contribution to climate change disruption, but also brings people together. And I've heard this, with other guests, little communities being fostered around this stuff, whether it's the stirring practices, the preparation of stuff, or just the curiosity and these new methods of more environmentally protective growing. You're fostering community connection, and clearly you've got this passion and desire to get out there and spread the good word, the literally good word about this. And you're going to be doing this on and at the Patch Organics in the future. That's really inspiring to hear that. So, look, just now naturally flowing into the last couple of questions in this excellent interview. Just let's stay with that. You in effect, you've given a bit of a plug there for these courses. And let's put some links to those. I know you've got a course coming up in November, I noticed on your website on the Patch Organics, but we'll put a link to your business link there on Facebook and perhaps on the web as well. But any other specific advice? It would sound to me like if you are down in the Bellingen area or not too far away from it or within a certain traveling radius, get down onto one of your workshops and get the good oil, as it were, from you directly. But other advice that you might want to offer to listeners as we start to come up to the end of this interview? People who are growing already or intending to go into biodynamic growing, where can they get more advice and information?
Look, and a general advice that I will give to anyone, doesn't matter even if you are growing or not, or doesn't even matter if you are a farmer or not, go and get a permaculture course done. The permaculture will give you a structure. You were saying before that we are here basically bringing back old ancient knowledge and techniques. Yes, but we need a modern structure to understand those. So here we are, permaculture. Now, once you get your permaculture design certificate, you're going to get given a wardrobe, which is full of tools and techniques. Now, my second advice there is don't do what I did. The first tool that has to go in your wardrobe is biodynamics. So you now have a structure of how you see it, and then you have the first main tool. All other tools will be applied to context. Biodynamics will apply in any context. So we start from there. And I'm saying, even if you're not a farmer, even if you are a cafe, and you have a few flowers in front of your cafe, you should put biodynamic preps on those flowers. Otherwise, there's no way. That's going to enhance the life force around you. And your cafe will probably be permaculture design. So it will produce no waste, and it will be for the benefit of the community. So we're moving here, as you can tell, Andrew, with this new way, with this new way of seeing and doing stuff. We're moving from an idea of a competitive human being into a new paradigm of a collaborating human being. And so here are we, biodynamics again. We are meant to collaborate to each other for the benefit of each other, not to compete. To compete to do what?
Yeah, it's like there is a real paradigm shift happening where the past has been all about competition because the prevalent idea is that there aren't enough resources to go around, and the new prevalent frame of being has to be there's more than enough resources to go around. There is abundance everywhere. And so if you start practicing abundance, if you have abundance in your home, in your backyard, in your little pot plants, then you start embodying abundance and then sharing that same idea. Now, of course, I say that being very privileged people living here in beautiful Bellingen, New South Wales, Australia. But I think for those people that are privileged, it's even more important to start embodying this idea of abundance.
And can I just say, folks, I mean, this is backed up. We've said before earlier in the interview, look, it takes time to change mindsets. Some of these ideas about whether it's conventional agricultural practice, whether it's conventional economic practice, I mean, it takes these ideas have been around for decades. They're lodged in the minds of a lot of people within the culture. They're very hard to shift, but that sense of something has to change. We're all aware that the current models of development, be they economic, agriculture, whatever, just are not cutting it anymore. They're not fit for purpose. So, I mean, that's what you're pointing at, I think. Would that be fair to say?
Oh, definitely. And I think this circles back to the initial question that you asked me, and we started talking about structural change in particular, how we are, Luigi was saying that no farmer sets out, consciously degrading their farmland. But we are all a product of our environment. We're all a product of our families, of where we're born, when we're born, the education system that we went through. And so after you go through all of that, like many people, I mean, we hit the wall as well. You hit a wall, you hit this feeling, like you said, something needs to change. You hit an edge. And I guess that's where, as Luigi was saying, you have to get re-educated.
100%.
For us, it was that permaculture course that we did 5 years ago. The other thing that I wanted to stress is that so many people go through this change because they feel disconnected as well. I think this sense of disconnection and this need to connect to something or feel more connected to something is really strong. We don't know how to articulate it. We don't know what it means to be connected. A lot of people, go to permaculture or biodynamic, start growing gardens because innately, intuitively, they know that somewhere down that nature, plants, growing things is the answer. But once again, you don't know how to articulate it. And so that's where biodynamics and anthroposophy come into play, because that connection that they're looking for, that they can feel through the act of gardening, is actually this idea of reconnecting to your spirituality. And so, again, re-educating yourself is so incredibly important, because we've hit a line in the sand. Something needs to change. We don't have the tools, the know-how, because of the context. So you just need to get re-educated, and I think new doors and new spaces of being come into play.
And I think, folks, that that could stand for the question I'm going to ask you finally. And if you feel that you've already answered it, I think that was a fantastic take-home message for listeners about how to actually start this process, at a bigger picture level. But just to give you the final opportunity, do you have any more take-home messages, in a sense, perhaps a few sentences, which could help bring your ideas on biodynamics together? We've covered so much material in this brilliant interview, but nonetheless, anything that might help you reinforce what you've talked about today, just to leave that in the ears of listeners as they leave this interview.
Look, depending how serious you are and how much changes you want to apply in your life of work or farming activities, if you are very, very, very serious, and then I will start again, as I said, with taking a permaculture designer course. That's just a life-changing education there. That's what happened to us. But on a more of a small action, not in terms of value, but in terms of easy to do, subscribe with BAA. Just get a subscription there, buy your first prep, put it in your compost if you have a compost warm tower or whatever you have. If you're doing compost teas, put the compost balls in there. If you have a market garden like us, or a big, maybe you want to get some soil activator in, some atmospheric spraying. So, look, the message from Rudolf Steiner was clear. Put the preps out. He doesn't talk about context. Put it on your lawn, put it on your flowers, put it on your farm, on your garden beds, on your 500 acres farm. It doesn't matter. Put the preps out. But as I said, nowadays in 2023, we need to have a structure to be able to think properly. We're too biased nowadays. So using my wife's word, going re-educated as we did, it's very important. Yeah.
And one last thing from me is, if you don't have access to land, then one really important thing that you can do is go online to Sustainable Table. On there is a regenerative farming map. It shows you all of the farms in Australia. Is it global? I'm just trying to think. Well, I only looked at Australia because that's my context. It shows you all of the regenerative farms that have subscribed to regenerative growing practices, and they have identified themselves, and they're on that map. And so if you know if there's a farm around you, in and around you, or if you can purchase produce from that farm, then that's one very big step into supporting a new shift in agriculture, in supporting regenerative agriculture, which is what we need.
Folks, fantastic last few nuggets of advice there and information for listeners to digest as we now wrap up this marvellous interview. Luigi and Nidya, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you today. I know you are absolutely certain you've given our audience such a fantastic smorgasbord of inspiring ideas which can help them take their next steps toward learning more about biodynamics or developing their own growing methods based on the fascinating range of more environmentally protective approaches that biodynamics has to offer. Your unique story today, along with those of other guests in the series, has helped describe how biodynamic growing methods are important in their ability to regenerate the biological health of soil, supercharge organic growing, restore biodiversity, and work in harmony with Mother Nature. And so, Luigi and Nidya, folks, it's now time to say goodbye. On behalf of both the podcast production and funding support organisations which made this podcast possible, they are Householders Options to Protect the Environment, that's Hope Incorporated Australia, and good old Biodynamic Agriculture Australia Limited, which is right down there on your doorstep, but of course is accessible via its website with all of those fantastic resources that Luigi mentioned, the preparations, the network contacts, the membership, sort of contacts that people can make there. Biodynamic Agriculture Australia Limited. I want to thank you so very much, you folks, for our conversation today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, Andrew.
You've been listening to an episode in the podcast series Biodynamic Farmers and Gardeners in Australia. The series was produced by Householders Options to Protect the Environment, Hope Incorporated Australia, with the generous funding support of Biodynamic Agriculture Australia Limited. It has been a pleasure to help raise awareness of some of the environmentally protective values of biodynamic growing practice in its ability to regenerate the biological health of soil, supercharge organic growing, restore biodiversity, and work in harmony with Mother Nature. Please consult the episode show notes for possible follow-up material on topics discussed in interview and any relevant contact details should you wish to respond to anything you have heard. And if you enjoyed the episode, please consider promoting it across your networks and giving it a positive rating in your preferred podcast app. You can also give us feedback via the short 5-minute online survey using the link also available in the show notes. My name is Andrew Nicholson, producer of the series, and thank you for listening.